Emily Thompson had always been fascinated by cultures beyond her own. Growing up in a quiet town in Oregon, she dreamed of exploring the world and finding something or someone who would make her life feel extraordinary. When she met Raj Mehra at a charity fundraiser in New York, that dream began to take shape. Raj was intelligent, charming, and effortlessly polite. He had come to the U.S. from India to pursue his master's degree in engineering, and his warmth drew Emily in immediately. Their first conversation stretched into hours, and by the end of the evening, Emily felt as if she had known him her whole life. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Raj introduced Emily to Indian food, music, and traditions. She loved how he spoke about family with such devotion, something she had always craved. Within a few months, they were inseparable. Weekends spent cooking together, long drives out of the city, and phone calls that lasted past midnight. Raj would often speak lovingly about his parents in India, especially his father, Arjun Mehra, a respected businessman known for his generosity and discipline. Emily admired the closeness they shared, believing that marrying Raj meant joining a family built on strong values and respect. A year later, Raj proposed on a chilly December night in Central Park. Emily said yes through tears of joy, unaware that the path ahead would be anything but a fairy tale. Raj's family insisted the wedding take place in India, and Emily, excited by the idea of an authentic cultural ceremony, agreed instantly. She quit her job, packed her life into 2 suitcases, and boarded a flight to Pune with her fiancé. When they arrived, Emily was overwhelmed by the colors, the noise, and the warmth of Raj's extended family. Everyone welcomed her with open arms, or so it seemed. Among the smiling faces, Arjun's presence stood out. Tall, confident, and impeccably dressed, he carried an air of quiet authority. From the first moment he greeted her, Emily sensed something difficult to describe, a strange mix of admiration and intensity in his eyes. He praised her for embracing Indian customs and often went out of his way to make her comfortable. At first, she saw his attention as fatherly kindness. He introduced her to local traditions, took her on short trips around the city, and told her stories about Raj's childhood. But as days passed, Emily began to notice the subtle shifts. His compliments became personal, his glances lingered too long, and his questions carried an undertone she couldn't quite ignore. Meanwhile, Raj's mother, Nisha, seemed distant, her smile tight and her conversations brief. Emily assumed she was simply adjusting to having a foreign daughter-in-law. Yet behind Nisha's silence was suspicion, a feeling that something in her home was slowly unraveling. As the wedding preparations continued, the atmosphere in the Mehra household grew tense. Emily couldn't explain it, but she often felt watched, as if unseen eyes followed her every move. The vibrant celebration she had imagined was slowly turning into something darker. She didn't know it then, but her dream of love and belonging had already set in motion a tragedy that would haunt 2 families forever. The week leading up to the wedding was filled with rituals, music, and endless guests arriving from across India. Emily tried her best to keep up with the customs and ceremonies, her face always smiling for the cameras and family members who wanted photos with the foreign bride. Yet beneath the cheerful surface, she felt something unsettling growing between her and Arjun. What began as harmless attention had started to feel like an invisible thread pulling them towards something neither could stop. Arjun often found excuses to be near her. He would ask if she needed help choosing jewelry, offer to drive her to the tailor, or stop by her room under the pretense of checking on her comfort. At first, Emily told herself it was just part of Indian hospitality. But slowly, his presence became too frequent, his compliments too intimate. He spoke about how modern women like her had courage and independence, qualities he admired but had never seen in his own marriage. His words carried a warmth that both flattered and frightened her. Raj, meanwhile, was constantly preoccupied with relatives and wedding arrangements. Between handling guests, decorations, and last-minute crises, he barely noticed how close his father had become to his bride. Emily, left alone for long stretches, began spending more time with Arjun than she should have. Their conversations grew deeper and strangely personal. He told her stories of his youth, how he once dreamed of moving abroad, how his marriage to Nisha had been arranged and devoid of passion. Emily listened, feeling sympathy for a man trapped in expectations, just as she sometimes felt trapped between cultures. One night, After a pre-wedding celebration, the electricity went out across the estate. The house was dark except for candlelight flickering in the corridors. Emily found herself outside on the balcony, watching the monsoon clouds roll in. Arjun joined her there. The silence between them felt heavy, and when their hands brushed accidentally, neither of them pulled away. That moment became the first step into something irreversible, a quiet betrayal born from loneliness, guilt, and confusion. What followed in the next few days was a blur of stolen glances and secret meetings. They told themselves it was only temporary, a mistake they would soon forget once the wedding ended. But desire is not easily buried, and both began to act carelessly. Nisha noticed the change almost immediately. She saw the way her husband's gaze lingered too long, how Emily blushed and avoided her eyes. Her instinct screamed that something was wrong. Late one night, when everyone was asleep, Nisha checked her husband's phone. What she found confirmed her worst fears, messages that could not be mistaken for anything innocent. Her hands trembled as she read them, each word slicing through her heart like a blade. She didn't confront him. Instead, she watched quietly, her anger simmering beneath a calm exterior. The wedding was only 3 days away. Guests were arriving in large numbers, the house filled with laughter and music. But behind the bright decorations and cheerful songs, 4 lives were tangled in a dangerous web of deceit. Emily tried to convince herself it would all end once the wedding was over. She had no idea the truth was already waiting to destroy everything on the night she was supposed to begin her new life. The day of the wedding arrived like a dream wrapped in gold and red. The Mehra estate was transformed into a palace of flowers, shimmering lights, and music that filled the air from dawn till dusk. Emily felt both nervous and excited as women adorned her in a traditional red bridal sari, heavy with embroidery and gold thread. The air smelled of jasmine and sandalwood, and the sound of drums echoed through the courtyard. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. A vision of tradition and grace, miles away from the simple life she once knew in Oregon. Raj looked proud as he entered the ceremony, wearing an ivory sherwani with a golden turban. The rituals began, with the priest chanting ancient verses as family members watched with emotion. To everyone present, the wedding seemed perfect. Laughter, blessings, and tears of joy filled the evening. Yet beneath the glittering lights, there were eyes that did not shine with happiness. Arjun's gaze lingered on Emily every chance he got, and though she tried to avoid looking at him, their eyes met more times than she cared to admit. The weight of their secret pressed on her chest like a stone. Nisha moved through the crowd like a shadow, her face calm but her heart burning. She had spent sleepless nights replaying the messages she found, each word echoing in her mind. Every smile her husband gave the bride now looked poisoned. Every touch, every glance felt like a betrayal unfolding before her eyes. She stayed silent, knowing the truth would come to light soon enough. As night fell, the wedding concluded with blessings from elders and a grand dinner that went on for hours. Guests danced under the open sky while fireworks lit up the darkness. Emily smiled for photographs, posed beside Raj, and accepted congratulations, but her mind was spiraling. She had hoped the wedding would wash away her guilt, that once she was Raj's wife, her mistake would vanish into memory. Instead, every sound, every light seemed to amplify her fear. When the guests finally left and the music faded, Emily and Raj were escorted to their decorated room, a space filled with rose petals, candles, and soft music. It was supposed to be their first night as husband and wife, but peace lasted only a few minutes. As Raj went to change, Emily's phone vibrated on the nightstand. One unread message glowed on the screen. "I need to see you. I can't let this end tonight." Raj picked it up before she could react. His expression changed instantly. He read the message twice, his eyes darkening as he turned toward her. Emily's throat went dry, her pulse racing. The silence in the room was suffocating. Raj didn't need to ask who had sent it. The answer was written all over her face. Without a word, he stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Emily followed, her voice trembling, but he didn't stop. Moments later, she heard raised voices from the courtyard, Raj's fury, Arjun's desperate attempts to calm him, and Nisha's footsteps approaching. The tension that had been building for weeks finally broke that night. The Mehra home, which only hours earlier had been filled with celebration, now trembled under the weight of betrayal. The night that was meant to mark the beginning of a new life was about to end in horror. The night air outside the Mehra home was heavy and still, the laughter from earlier long gone. The flickering lights that once symbolized celebration now cast eerie shadows across the courtyard. Raj stood face to face with his father, his hands trembling, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Emily stood a few steps behind him, frozen in fear, while Nisha lingered near the doorway, her eyes glinting with a strange calmness that came only from deep, unrelenting pain. Raj demanded the truth, his words broken by rage and heartbreak. Arjun tried to explain, his voice low and desperate, but the weight of his guilt made every word sound hollow. The truth was no longer something that could be softened or hidden. It had exploded into the open, raw and destructive. Emily wanted to speak, to apologize, but her lips wouldn't move. The world around her blurred, her thoughts drowned by the sound of Raj's anger and Arjun's pleas. Nisha watched silently, her emotions numb. For weeks she had carried the burden of knowing, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what she had discovered. But now that it was all unraveling in front of her, she felt nothing but exhaustion. Her marriage, her family, and her dignity had all been crushed by two people she had trusted. The woman who had entered her home as a bride had also brought its destruction. Raj's voice grew louder, echoing through the courtyard until it reached the sleeping neighbors. He shouted at his father, accusing him of betrayal, of destroying everything sacred. Arjun's composure finally broke. He dropped to his knees, begging his son to understand, to forgive him for losing control, for making the worst mistake of his life. But Raj was beyond reason. His world had shattered, and all he could see was red. Emily stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, trying to stop him. Her cries only fueled Raj's fury. He turned toward her, his eyes filled with disgust. The weight of humiliation crushed him, the thought that the woman he loved had chosen his father over him. On a nearby table, a kitchen knife glinted under the dim light. Raj grabbed it without thinking. Arjun reached out to stop him, but the movement only made things worse. In a single impulsive act of rage, Raj plunged the knife into his father's chest. The sound of the blade cutting through flesh silenced the world around them. Arjun staggered backward, his eyes wide with shock, before collapsing onto the cold floor. Emily screamed and fell beside him, her shaking hands covered in blood. Raj stood still, the knife slipping from his grip, his face pale with horror. Nisha moved slowly toward them, her expression unreadable. Then something inside her snapped. Years of restraint, pain, and betrayal erupted all at once. She grabbed the same knife, her body trembling as she stared at Emily. Emily tried to back away, but Nisha lunged forward, slashing wildly. The blade struck Emily in the abdomen, and she fell to the ground, gasping, her bridal jewelry clinking against the blood-stained floor. Within moments, she stopped moving. By the time the neighbors arrived, drawn by the screams, the sight that met them was one they would never forget. Arjun and Emily lay lifeless in a pool of crimson, the scent of flowers and blood mixing in the air. Raj sat against the wall, motionless and hollow-eyed, while Nisha stood nearby, her clothes soaked, the knife dangling from her trembling hand. The wedding night that was meant to unite two families had ended with two bodies, three broken souls, and silence that screamed louder than any cry for help. The morning after the tragedy, the Mehra home stood in eerie silence. The once vibrant house that had hosted laughter, music, and the scent of wedding flowers was now filled with the stench of blood and smoke from burnt candles. The decorations, still hung from the walls, faded and torn, like remnants of a dream-turned nightmare. Outside, a crowd had gathered, neighbors, police officers, and journalists, all whispering the same words, double murder on the wedding night. Inside, the police moved quietly through the rooms, taking photographs and collecting evidence. Raj sat on the floor, his clothes stained with his father's blood, staring blankly at the wall. His eyes were open but empty, as though his mind had already left the room. Nisha sat nearby, her face calm, almost peaceful. When an officer asked her what had happened, she spoke softly, almost whispering, describing every moment without hesitation. She confessed to stabbing Emily after watching her husband die, her tone steady and cold, as though she had accepted her fate long before the act itself. The story spread through the neighborhood within hours, reaching news channels and newspapers by evening. American bride's affair with father-in-law ends in double murder, the headlines read. Reporters gathered at the gate, cameras flashing as they tried to capture every angle of the crumbling mansion. What had once been a proud family was now a national scandal. The investigation was swift. Arjun's phone revealed months of secret messages between him and Emily, messages filled with affection, longing, and regret. Photos from hidden corners of the estate showed them together, confirming everything. The police pieced the story together. An affair discovered on the wedding night, a confrontation that turned violent, and a chain of decisions that no one could undo. In court, Nisha sat silent, her eyes fixed on the ground. She didn't plead for mercy. Her lawyer spoke of emotional trauma and betrayal, but she refused to defend herself. Raj was questioned for hours, though it was clear he had lost all will to live. The judge's final verdict sentenced Nisha to life imprisonment, while Raj was sent for psychiatric treatment. Months passed, and the Mehra house was sealed off. No one wanted to buy it. No one wanted to live where two lives had ended in blood. The neighbors claimed they could still hear faint sounds at night, the soft sobbing of a woman, footsteps echoing, in empty corridors, and sometimes the faint melody of wedding music that would fade into silence. Emily's parents flew in from America to take her body home. They were met with reporters, flashing cameras, and endless questions, but they said nothing. All they took was a coffin and the shattered remains of their daughter's dream. Raj eventually left India for a distant country, trying to escape the shadows that followed him. He never spoke of that night again. The Mehra family name faded from memory, surviving only in online articles and whispered gossip. Years later, locals still avoided passing the old house after dark. Some said they had seen a woman in a red bridal, standing by the balcony staring into the distance. Others swore they heard two voices arguing in the courtyard, followed by a faint cry. Whether truth or imagination, one thing remained certain. The echoes of that wedding night never left the Mehra home, and its walls continued to whisper the story of love, betrayal, and death that destroyed everything it touched.